At Nuremberg, 16 men gave the same defense. I was just following orders. The world called it an excuse. It wasn't. In 1961, Stanley Milgram proved it. His experiment on ordinary people broke him. 65% pulled a lever they believed was killing someone, because a man in a lab coat told them to. Not Nazis, not soldiers, regular people. So why did it work? For 15 years after the war, the world agreed on one answer. The Nazis were different. Something in German culture bred obedience. Something in them made it possible. Then, in 1961, the world's most wanted Nazi stood trial in Jerusalem. Adolf Eichmann, the man who organized the logistics of the Holocaust. Everyone expected a monster. What they got was a mid-level bureaucrat who seemed genuinely confused about why he was on trial. He was polite. He followed procedure. He told the court he had never personally hated a Jew. One journalist watched the whole trial. Her name was Hannah Arendt, and what she wrote in 1963 changed how we understand evil forever. Eichmann, she said, was not a demon. He was shallow, thoughtless, a man who confused doing his job with being a good person. She gave it a name. The banality of evil. And then she said the part nobody wanted to hear. If Eichmann wasn't special, then the defense he gave might not be a lie. When he said he was just following orders, he might have been telling the truth about how his mind actually worked. 3 months later, a Yale psychologist read her work and decided to test it. Milgram designed a simple experiment. You walk into a lab at Yale. A man in a gray lab coat tells you you're helping with a memory study. Your job is to ask questions to a learner in the next room. Every time he gets one wrong, you press a button that gives him an electric shock. The shocks start at 15 volts. They go up to 450, marked in red. Marked as dangerous, marked as severe. The learner is an actor. The shocks are fake, but you don't know that. At 150 volts, the learner screams. At 300, he begs you to stop. At 330, he goes silent. And the man in the gray lab coat tells you calmly to keep going. Before the experiment, Milgram asked 40 Yale psychology students what would happen. They predicted that almost nobody would go to the end, maybe 1 in 100, a sadist. They were off by a factor of 65. 26 out of 40 ordinary men pushed the lever to 450 volts. Men who sweated, trembled, bit their lips, begged the experimenter to check on the learner, and then pushed the lever anyway. Milgram ran it 18 more times. Different rooms, different cities, different setups. Over 700 people in total. The number moved, but not by much. And in 2009, a psychologist named Jerry Berger got permission to run a modern version. New ethics rules, new decade, same kind of people. The numbers barely moved. 50 years, 2 continents, thousands of participants, and the same answer every time. The question stopped being whether people would obey. It became why. Milgram called it the agentic state. Your brain has 2 modes. Autonomous mode, where you act on your own values, and agentic mode, where you see yourself as the instrument of someone else's will. In agentic mode, you don't feel like you're making the decision. You feel like you're carrying it out. The moral weight shifts upward to whoever gave the order. If this is the kind of thinking you want more of, make sure you're subscribed. There's a lot more coming. For decades, psychologists argued about whether agentic mode was real or just a convenient excuse. Then, in 2016, a team at University College London ran the same basic Milgram setup inside an fMRI scanner. They watched what the brain actually does when you obey. They found something unsettling. When you act on your own choice, your brain processes the action and the outcome as tightly connected. You did that. You own it. When you act on someone else's order, that connection weakens. The brain literally registers less ownership of what your own hands just did. Agentic mode isn't a metaphor. It's a measurable change in how your brain processes responsibility. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Human societies only work because most people, most of the time, follow the rules handed to them. The problem is that the same switch that lets you show up to work on time is the switch that let a battalion of middle-aged German policemen shoot 1,600 people in a single afternoon. July 1942. A Polish village called Józefów, Reserve Police Battalion 101. Around 500 men from Hamburg. Workers, artisans, salesmen, drafted because they were too old for the regular army. Their commander wept as he gave the order. He told the men they were going to round up the Jewish population and shoot everyone who couldn't work. And then he did something almost nobody talks about. He offered them a way out. Any man who felt he couldn't do it could step forward. No punishment, no consequences. Just step out. Out of nearly 500 men, 12 stepped out. The rest killed 1,500 women, children, and elderly people before nightfall. Over the next 16 months, that same battalion shot or deported over 80,000 Jews. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. In all the post-war interrogations, across every police battalion that committed these acts, historians have not found a single case where a man who refused to kill was actually punished for it. The price of disobedience was never death. It was awkwardness, social discomfort, being seen as weak by the other men. They killed anyway. So is everyone who obeys a monster? Or is there a way out of this? February 1989, 9 months before the Berlin Wall fell. A 20-year-old waiter named Chris Gueffroy tried to climb the last fence into West Berlin. 4 East German border guards opened fire. 2 of them aimed wide. On purpose, they fired warning shots into the air and the ground, knowing what they were doing. One of them didn't. Ingo Heinrich fired an aimed burst into Gueffroy's chest. 2 years later, all 4 stood trial in a reunified Germany. Every one of them gave the same defense Eichmann gave. I was just following orders. Judge Theodor Seidel didn't accept it. He cited Nuremberg directly. He said there was a core area of justice no law could touch, and that orders to kill unarmed civilians never deserve obedience. The 2 guards who aimed wide were acquitted. The judge ruled they did not kill and did not intend to kill. Heinrich went to prison. That's the whole lesson, sitting inside one verdict. The agentic state is real. Your brain really does try to hand the responsibility upward, but the guards who aimed wide prove it is not a prison, it's a choice point. Every person who has ever refused to pull the trigger, refused to sign the form, refused to stay quiet, is proof that the switch can be overridden. The 35% who walked out of Milgram's lab didn't have better values. They had one thing in common. They refused to let someone else carry the weight of what their hands were doing. The question isn't whether you would follow orders. You already do every day. At work, in groups, in the news you believed this morning without checking. The question is whether you would notice you had a choice. Subscribe to Kairos. Think sharper, know faster.